The small desert town of Cedar Breaks, Utah, had always been quiet. On March 22, 2009, its 147 residents were winding down for the evening, unaware that one ordinary night would change their community forever. The air was crisp, with spring just beginning to tug the desert away. Warm afternoons followed by the icy nights. Nicole Powell, a 28-year-old elementary school teacher, was finishing her evening routine in her modest rental home. Her neighbor Warren Blackburn, a kind 72-year-old man, noticed her crossing his gravel driveway at 8:43 p.m. Nicole carried a green PDX dish she had brewed days earlier. Warren remembered it fondly. It was the same dish his late wife had used of decades during church potlucks. Nicole chatted with Warren about her upcoming parent-teacher conferences, her voice calm and cheerful. She mentioned that her fiancé, Marcus Reed, would arrive from Salt Lake City the next morning for a long weekend. They had been planning their wedding for September, and Marcus had finally chosen his groomsman. Their conversation lasted about 20 minutes. Nicole declined Warren's offer of leftover apple pie, saying she had a spilling taste of great before her bed. She pulled her denim jacket tight against the evening chill and walked up the 3 steps of her porch. The motion sensor clicked on, bathing her in a soft glow. That small moment was the last anyone would see of Nicole. Marcus grew concerned about 9:14 p.m. when Nicole did not answer her calls or texts. He explained to the dispatcher that she always responded immediately during the evening. They had a ritual, talking before bed, sharing daily stories, making plans. Marcus drove the 4 hours from Salt Lake City, hoping it was just a small delay. When he arrived, Nicole's house was dark, doors locked, and her Toyota Camry parked as usual. There was no sign of her. Deputy Angela Chen arrived at 9:38 p.m. and found a scan that defied explanation. Every window was latched. The doors were secure inside. Nicole's life had stopped mid-motion. A spreadsheet of student grades lay open on her laptop. Laundry was dumped in the washing machine. Her purse rested on the dresser with wallet and case inside. Half-graded spelling tests were scattered across the kitchen counter. It was as if someone had paused her life, then vanished. Warren Blackburn's timeline was the only clue. He had watched her cross his yard and ascend her porch step. He guessed it was about 8:55 p.m. after she entered her house. He had heard nothing unusual, no sounds of struggle, no behaves, no screams, yet Nicole was gone. Deputy Chen examined the surrounding area. The desert earth was hard, softened only near Nicole's garden. Nicole's footprints showed she had walked to the porch, but there were no tracks leaving the property. The impossibility was clear. Nicole had either disappeared into thin air or someone had abducted her in a way that left no trace. The Iron Country Sheriff's Department, Utah State Police, and the FBI were soon involved. Sheriff Raymond Porter, a veteran of 34 years, examined the house late into the night. Marcus stood in the driveway, distraught, calling her name into the silent desert. He had last spoken Nicole at 7:30 p.m., hours before during his drive south. Their conversation had been ordinary, loving, and full of small plans. Nothing hinted at danger. Searches began immediately. Volunteers and deputies combed the surrounding sagebrush, irrigation ditches, abandoned outbuildings, and rocky hills. They called Nicole's name over and over. The desert offered only wind moving through junipers and the distant howl of coyotes. At 1 a.m., Patricia Powell, Nicole's mother, received Marcus' call. Her scream of disbelief echoed through her home in Provo, 70 miles away. Patricia had raised Nicole's largely alone, working double shift as a nurse. She had watched her daughter grow into a dedicated teacher, full of life and responsibility. Now Nicole was gone, and nothing made sense. By sunrise, Cedar Breaks had transformed. Residents, volunteers, and law enforcement were united in search efforts. Nicole had vanished from a locked house in a narrow 31-minute window. The physical evidence did not match reality, Doors locked, windows lost, no footprints, no beheals, no signs of struggle. It was as if the desert itself had slowed her. Patricia arrived in Cedar Breaks that morning, worn and anxious, and met Marcus in the driveway. Both were struggling to reconcile the reality they faced. The initial investigation revealed the cruel pose of Nicole's life. Half-graded test, an open laptop, a phone charger still plugged in. She had left nothing behind that explained her disappearance. Sheriff Porter organized search teams across the desert landscape, dividing volunteers into grids. They checked every culvert, dry wash, abandoned mine, and rocky outcrop. The desert revealed nothing, only old tires, discarded fencing, and the remains of livestock, long gone. It seemed to absorb their efforts, keeping its secrets deep within the red rock and sandstone layers. Detective Sarah Brennan, an experienced investigator from the Utah State Police, arrived on March 24. She approached the case with careful skepticism. Young women don't vanish without reason, she told the team. She examined Marcus' timeline, his phone records, finances, and interviews. Everything about him was ordinary. There were no motives, no hidden conflicts, no secret pressures. Nicole had been exactly who she appeared, kind, diligent, and trusting. The first lead came on March 28. A gas station attendant reported seeing a woman resembling Nicole in nearby Parawan. Surveillance footage was inclusive. The woman wore a black jacket instead of Nicole's usual denim. The sighting offered hope, but no answer. Patricia stayed in Cedar Breaks, sleeping in Nicole's rental house. She needed to be close to maintain a presence in the space her daughter had last occupied. Friends and community members tried to offer explanations. Maybe Nicole had left voluntarily, maybe she had a secret life, maybe she would return. Patricia rejected every theory. Her daughter had not abandoned her responsibility. Something terrible had happened. As April passed, Brennan passed leads outside Cedar Breaks, bus drivers, student workers, distant relatives, but all led nowhere. By May, the case joined the list of unsolved Utah disappearances. Women who vanished, leaving families trapped between hope and despair. Sheriff Porter reduced active searches due to budget limits, but Patricia never stopped her vigil. She walked the desert trails, distributed flyers, and sat in Nicole's empty home, clinging to the last hope that one day answers would come. Detective Lucas Hammond rebuilt in Cedar Breaks in 2012. A seasoned investigator, he had seen many difficult cases but never one like Nicole Powell's. He reviewed every piece of evidence meticulously. Hard-packed desert, locked doors, missing footprints, it all violated his understanding of crime. Yet he could not let go. He spent nights studying photos, timelines, and interviews, trying to find what others had missed. Hammond's obsession grew. He rented a small house near Cedar Breaks, transforming a room into an investigation center. Maps, charts, and photos covered the walls. He drove desert routes repeatedly, questioning every detail. Years passed, but he refused to accept that the case would remain unsolved. In 2013, Hammond noticed subtle disturbances in the desert soil from the night of Nicole's disappearance. Wind patterns and ground marking suggested someone had deliberately erased evidence. His theories became elaborate, linking timing, terrain, and opportunity. He analyzed every service worker, neighbor, and visitor in Cedar Breaks during March 2009. He was searching for the detail that would finally unlock the mystery. By 2019, after 7 years of study, Hammond had no reason to believe the case would resolve, until advances in forensic science made the impossible possible. By 2019, Detective Lucas Hammond had spent nearly a decade studying Nicole Powell's disappearances. Every detail, every report, every rumor had been logged, mapped, and analyzed. He had driven the desert roads countless times, questioning anyone who might have seen something unusual. And now, thanks to new forensic technology, he had hope that the impossible might finally become impossible. Hammond's first breakthrough came when he examined soil samples from the around Nichols' home. Using advanced chemical analysis, he detected traces of substance that did not belong. Small amounts of industrial chemicals, almost invisible to the naked eye. The mixture was strange, unusual for a residential neighborhood. But what was more troubling was the pattern. The chemicals suggested that someone had tried to cover tracks, erasing sign of movement and presence. Someone had come prepared. Meanwhile, online communities devoted to missing persons had started noticing Nico's case again. Social media posts, discussion forums, and Reddit threads were full of theories. Some thought she had run away. Some suspected abduction. A few darker minds suggested impossible things. Alien encounters, secret societies, supernatural events. But Hammond ignored the old speculation. He focused on what could be proven. Using the swell evidence, Hammond reconstructed a possible route the kidnapper might have taken. He looked at every dirt road, trail, and creek in a 20-mile radius. Slowly a picture began to emerge. Nicole might have been taken by someone familiar with the desert. Someone who knew how to move silently, leaving no footprints or tire marks. Marcus Reed, Nicole's fiance, had returned to Utah to assist in the renewed investigation. He spent hours with Hammond, going over Nicole's life, relationships, and habits. Marcus insisted that Nicole had no enemies, no secret, and no reason to disappear willingly. She was a teacher, Lucas. She cared about her students more than herself. She had plain dreams. This is not just a case. This is my wife, my life. I need answers, Marcus said, voice trembling but firm. Hammond agreed. He felt the weight of responsibility keenly. This was no longer just a missing person case. It was a puzzle that had haunted him for 10 years. And now, with new forensic tools, he was determined to solve it. One of the first real clues came from a local resident, a man named Ron Glibert. He had lived on the outskirts of Cedar Breaks for decades, mostly keeping to himself, but he recalled seeing a strange vehicle on the night of Nicole's disappearance. It was a white van, older model, and it had stopped near Nicole's house around 8:50 p.m. Just minutes before she was last seen. Ron had not thought much of it at the time, assuming it was a delivery or service van, but Hammond knew better. Hammond cross-checked vehicle records and discovered that no legitimate service vans had been the area that night. The van was unregistered, or at least it had false plates. This was a huge development. It suggested planning, preparation, and premeditation. Nicole's disappearance was not random. It had been orchestrated by someone who knew what they were doing. The detective also re-interviewed Nicole's nearbys, many of whom had never spoken much before. A woman named Elaine Rivera remembered seeing a shadow moving near Nicole's backward around 8:50 p.m. She could not make out details, just a figure, crouched low, moving quickly, like someone trying to avoid being seen. This combined with Ron's van sighting reinforced the theory of abduction. Nicole had been taken deliberately, but there was still a problem. How had the abductor entered a locked house, taken Nicole, and left no trace? Hammond considered every possibility: secret entrances, unlocked windows, or maybe even a trusted neighbor, but nothing fit. The house had no secret doors. The windows were locked. No one had keys besides Nicole and Marcus was out of town. Hammond's next breakthrough came from satellite technology, using enhanced satellite imaging from the night of March 22, 2009. He identified subtle disturbances in the desert just beyond Nicole's property. A faint trail appeared, invisible to the eye but detectable with heat mapping and soil displacement data. The trail led to an abandoned irrigation canal 2 miles from her house. It was a dry channel, deep and narrow, perfect for someone to hide a vehicle. The canal became a focus. Hammond and his team spent weeks combing it, searching for signs of Nicole or the vehicle. Finally, small remnants of fibers were found, fibers matching the green PDX dish Nicole had borrowed from her neighbor. Warren Blackburn. They were torn, stuck in thorny bushes along the canal. The discovery was subtle but bitter. Nicole had been removed through this area. She had not disappeared magically. She had been taken physically. Marcus accompanied Hammond on these searches. Every finding was both a relief and a heartbreak. Marcus could finally visualize what had happened to Nicole, but the reality was painful. He would often pause, starting at the dry canal, managing her running, screaming, or being carried away. He paced Hammond. Who would do this? Why her? Was it random? Was it personal? Hammond did not have answers yet, but he did have leads. Forensic analysis of the fibers suggested they had been cut deliberately, perhaps in a struggle. DNA swabs were taken, but after 10 years, results were inconclusive. The case still required someone alive to remember, or someone willing to confess. Months passed. The investigation expanded, including neighboring counties and state lines. Every abandoned vehicle, every suspicious person in 2009 was cross-checked with Nicole's disappearance timeline. Hammond and his team compiled over 100 reports, interviewed hundreds of witnesses, and still found themselves circling the same questions. How did someone take Nicole from a locked house? Why Cedar Breaks? And most importantly, where was she now? Then in early 2020, Hammond received an anonymous tip. The caller claimed to have information about a man known locally as Frank the Carpenter. Frank had lived in Cedar Breaks at the time and was known for odd behavior. He had disappeared around 2009, shortly after Nicole vanished. Residents described him as reclusive, someone who avoided social interactions and worked at odd hours. Hammond felt a jolt of hope. He dug into public records and discovered that Frank had moved to Idaho in 2010. He had left behind a cabin, a truck, and personal effects that suggested sudden departure. Forensics on the cabin revealed traces of clothing fibers similar to Nicole's, along with unusual chemical residues. The same mix found in the soil near her home. The evidence was not conclusive yet, but it was the first real link between a suspect and Nicole. Marcus, still deeply involved, helped Hammond trace Frank's movements using phone records, bank accounts, and social media. Frank had stayed under the radar, avoiding major cities and credit use, but small gaps in his story suggested he had connections in Cedar Breaks. Hammond hypothesized that Frank might have prepared for years, studied Nicole's habit, and executed the abduction perfectly. With federal support, Hammond obtained search warrants for Frank's current residence in Idaho. Law enforcement raided the property, uncovering strange contraptions in the garage, locks, stains, and hidden compartments. Some of these items matched descriptions of what might have been used in Nicole's disappearance. They also found personal journals detailing obsession with local women from Cedar Breaks. Nicole's name was mentioned. The breakthrough was bittersweet. Hammond knew this could lead no Nicole, or it could lead to confirmation of the worst, that she had been harmed. Every step forward brought hope, fear, in equal measure. Authorities expanded the search to surrounding states using dogs, drones, and ground teams. Hammond coordinated with Marcus to identify safe locations where Nicole could have been held. The desert terrain, with its hidden gullies, caves, and abandoned buildings, offered endless possibilities. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack, but Hammond now had leads, suspects, and physical evidence that had never existed before. By late 2020, Frank the Carpenter was in custody. He remained silent, denying involvement, but the forensic evidence, the fibers, chemicals, journals, and materials, was mounting. Hammond felt closer than ever to unlocking the truth, to finally giving Nicole's family and Marcus answers they had waited for over a decade. Even as winter descended on Cedar Breaks, Marcus continued his vigil. He visited Nicole's old home, leaving flowers in her favorite color, yellow. He spoke her empty rooms, reciting stories of his day, imagining her response. This act of devotion kept hope alive, not just for him, but for everyone who refused to let Nicole fade into memory. Hammond worked tirelessly, connecting dots that had gone unnoticed for 10 years. Every fiber, chemical, and trace was a clue, and every small victory brought the possibility of resolution. He knew the case was not just about solving a crime, it was about restoring life to a woman who had been stolen from her family, her fiancé, and her community. And deep in the desert, the story of that night in March 2009 was slowly being told, piece by piece, by the careful hands to those who refused to forget. Detective Lucas Hammond felt a mixture of relief and tension the day Frank the carpenter was taken into custody. For over 10 years, the case of Nicole Powell's disappearance had been a shadow over Cedar Breaks, haunting families, friends, and anyone who had cared about her. Finally, the man most suspected of being involved was behind bars, but Hammond knew that arrest alone did not bring closure. Arrest was only the beginning. Frank sat in the interrogation room, his arms crossed, face expressionless, his eyes flicked briefly toward Hammond. But there was no hint of recognition, no sign of guilt. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old coffee, a smell that Hammond had grown used to over long nights of questioning witnesses and suspects. Frank, Hammond began, keeping his tone calm but firm. We know you were in a Cedar Breaks the night Nicole Powell disappeared. We have evidence linking you to her, including fibers, chemical residues, and personal journals. We need answers. Where is she? Frank said nothing. He simply started, lips pressed together, silent as stone. Hammond leaned forward, careful not to show frustration. Years of experience had taught him that patience was often the sky. He had dealt with the stubborn, the silent, the deceptive, and he had learned that even the hardest walls could crumble with the right approach. Hammond decided to start slowly, asking about Frank's life in Cedar Breaks. He moved there after high school, right? Worked as a carpenter? Yes, Frank said, voice low and control. Did you know Nicole Powell? Hammond asked. Frank's eyes shifted briefly. It was the smallest moment, barely noticeable, but it was enough for Hammond to register. I knew of her, Frank said. Hammond pressed on. Did you ever see her at her home at night that disappeared? Frank shook his head. I was elsewhere. His tone was clipped, unnatural. Hammond studied him carefully. Frank, this has been 10 years. If you know anything, now is the time. We have evidence. Fibers from her clothing were found in areas connected to you. Chemical matching material you had. Your journals mentioned Burr. Daniel won't help. For a long moment, Frank said nothing. Then finally, he leaned back, eyes distant, voice softer. I did not mean for it to happen. Hammond's heart raced. That was the first hint of truth he had gotten. He nodded slowly. Tell me what happened, Frank. Start from the beginning. Frank's story began quietly, almost as if he were afraid the words would vanish if spoken aloud. He had been obsessed with Nicole Powell for months before her disappearance. Not a healthy obsession, Hammond realized, but a dark fixation. He followed her movements, watched her routines, and learned when she was alone. On the night of March 22, 2009, he decided to act. He had planned carefully. The white van had been his, an older model intentionally unregistered, fitted with the false plates. He knew Nicole's house well enough to know when the lights would be off, when Marcus would be out of town, and when she would be alone. He had expected it to be easy, but things went wrong. Hammond listened closely, nothing very detailed. Frank described how Nicole had resisted, screamed, and fought. In the struggle, he admitted he had injured her, but insisted he never intended to kill her. I did not know what to do. I panicked, he said. Hammond asked where she was taken. Frank hesitated. I kept her at a remote cabin, he finally said. The cabin was deep in the Idaho wilderness, abandoned and isolated. I thought I could keep her safe. From myself, from everything. I didn't want anyone to find her. I didn't want to hurt her. I thought I could fix things. The confession was chilling. Hammond felt a mix of relief and dread. He looked that there was a path forward. Did it imagine Nichols suffering for 10 long years? He asked Frank for specifics, location, condition, and interactions. Frank reluctantly described the cabin, the supplies he had left, and his own attempts at hiding everything from the outside world. Marcus sat silently in an adjustment room, watching the interrogation through a one-way mirror. When Hammond finally called him in, Marcus' hands shook as he gripped a chair. Lucas, is she alive? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Hammond took a deep breath. We don't know yet, but we have a location, and that's the first real step in finding her. We finally have a lead we can act on. The team immediately mobilized. Officers, forensic reports, expert, and search units flew to Idaho. Satellite image, drone surveys, and detailed maps of the wildernesses guided them to the abandoned cabin Frank had described. It was remote, surrounded by dense forest, with only a narrow path leading to it. The air was cold and trees dense, and the cabin's exterior showed signs of long-term neglect, but Hammond could feel in his gut that his was it. The place where the next chapter of Nico's story would unfold. As the team approached the cabin, noticed signs of recent activity. Footprints, tire tracks, and discrete items hinted that someone had been there not too long ago. Hammond's pulse quickened. Every second mattered. Inside the cabin was dark and dusty, filled with old furniture and remnants of past use. And then in a hidden corner, they found signs of habitation, blankets, food containers, and a small, locked room at the back. Forensic teams carefully unlocked the room. There, in a state of shock and extreme fatigue, was Nicole Powell. She was alive. Her appearance had changed after 10 years of confinement. Her hair longer, her clothes on, but she recognized Hammond and Marcus immediately. Tears streamed down her face as she reached out. Marcus, is it really you? Marcus dropped to his knees, holding her tightly. The reunion was overwhelming, emotional beyond words. Hammond stepped back, allowing the moment, knowing the years of fear, anxiety, and uncertainty were ending. Nicole whispered, I thought no one would ever find me. Hammond assured her gently, you are safe now, Nicole. We got you. The aftermath was a mixture of relief, healing, and processing. Nicole was taken to a hospital for a full checkup, both physical and psychological. She had endured extreme hardship, isolation, and trauma. Doctors noted signs of malnutrition, stress, and psychological strain, but she was alive, and that was what mattered most. Frank was transported back to Cedar Breaks for trial. His confession, combined with forensic evidence, made the case airtight. During court proceedings, details emerged about the meticulous planning, the psychological manipulation, and the attempts to cover tracks. Frank's behavior was scrutinized, and experts testified about his dangerous obsession, confirming that his actions were deliberate and premeditated. For the community, Nico's return was both shocking and inspiring. Local residents had given up hope over the years, assuming she was lost forever, but her survival was a testament to persistence, investigation, and the refusal to forget a missing person. Schools, neighborhoods, and local media celebrated her return, emphasizing resilience and the importance of never giving up. Hammond, tough, proud of the breakthrough, remained cautious. Any recovery would be a long road. Trauma from years of captivity could not be erased quickly. Nicole needed support, therapy, and understanding, but she had survived. That survival gave hope to others whose loved ones were missing. In private, Marcus and Nicole began the process of rebuilding their lives. Simple activities, walking in the park, sharing meals, laughing together, became profound symbols of normalcy. Every day was a victory, every small joy reminder that life could continue even after darkness. Hammond continued to oversee the investigation, ensuring no detail was overlooked. Evidence collection, courtroom preparation, and public safety measures were still essential. The case, though resolved in terms of capture and reunion, still carried lessons about vigilance, community involvement, and the necessity of advanced forensic tools in solving long unsolved cases. Prankster concluded with a guilty verdict. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Justice had been served, but the emotional scars remained for those affected. Hammond felt a quiet satisfaction, not from punishment, but from finally giving Nicole and Marcus a chance to reclaim their lives. For Cedar Breaks, the case became a symbol of hope. A decade-long mystery had ended not in despair, but reunion. Detective Hammond, through patience, technology, and determination, had brought answers to the question that had haunted a community for 10 years. Nicole's story, though painful, inspired advocacy for missing persons. Families who had lost hope were reminded that evidence, and relentless investigation could bring results. Schools began programs to educate children about safety. Communities formed volunteer search teams, and law enforcement adopted new technologies to assist in unresolved cases. Years later, Nicole and Marcus would look back on those dark times with gratitude for survival and resilience. And they would speak publicly about the ordeal, emphasizing hope, courage, and the importance of never giving up. Their story became a beacon for others, a reminder that even in the blackest moments, there is the possibility of light. Detective Hammond meanwhile continued his work, knowing that there were countless other mysteries, missing persons, and unresolved crime waiting for attention. But the resolution of Nicole Powell's case remained a high point, a moment where tenacity, intelligence, and human empathy combined to restore life where it had been nearly lost. The desert of Cedar Breaks, which had once hidden secrets and straw, now stood as a quiet witness to truth, justice, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. The day Nicole Powell returned to Cedar Breaks filled swell. After 10 years of absence, the town seemed to hold its breath. Streets that had grown quieter with the loss of one of their own now buzzed with anticipation. Families, neighbors, and friends gathered near the Powell household, hoping to catch even a glimpse of the woman who had vanished so long ago. Marcus waited patiently on the porch, holding Nicole's favorite blanket in his hands. His eyes scanned the crowd for familiar faces, teachers, old friends, neighbors, anyone who had held hope during the long years of silence. When the car carrying Nicole finally pulled into the driveway, the air seemed to crackle with a mix of relief and disbelief. She stepped out slowly, her movements cautious but steady. Her hair had grown long and old, and her eyes, though weary, shone with life. Children in the crowd whispered her name. "It's really her," they said. Adults smiled, some with tears glistening in their eyes. Nicole's presence reminded everyone moments. Marcus approached her gently. "Welcome home," he whispered. Nicole's voice trembled as she replied, I am home." The first days after her return were quiet and careful. Nicole's body had endured years of minimal nutrition and limited physical activity. She needed time to regain strength, adjust to sunlight, and learn to touch the world outside again. Doctors provided both medical care and counseling. They explained that physical healing would be just as critical as physical recovery. Trauma from years of capability could not be rushed. Patience and compassion would be essential. Hammond and his team continued to provide security and oversight. Though Frank had confessed and was in custody, there remained concerns about potential copycats, curious strangers, and the press. Maintaining Nicole's privacy was crucial. Officers stationed discreetly around the nearby hood ensured her safety while allowing her moments of normalcy. Nicole's fast meals were simple, nutritious, and carefully portioned. Every bite was a reminder that the world had changed, yet also a confirmation that she could reclaim control over her life. She began slowly, sipping water and nibbling small portions of fruit, gradually moving to more substantial meals. Marcus sat beside her, offering gentle encouragement and sharing stories of the outside world, explaining how much had changed and what remained familiar. The physical recovery was more complex. Nicole experienced flashbacks, nightmares, and intensive anxiety. Counseling sessions focused on grounding techniques, breathing exercises, and gradual exposure to outside stimuli. Therapists explained the trust needed to be rebuilt slowly, step by step. Nicole practiced small outings, starting with walks in her backyard, then moving to the neighborhood streets, always accompanied by Marcus or trusted friend. Community support became a cornerstone of Nicole's healing. Volunteers offered meals, visited her at home, and assisted with errands. Local schools and organizations organized awareness events emphasizing the importance of safety, vigilance, and compassion for survivors. Nicole's story inspired town meetings focused on preventive measures, missing person advocacy, and psychological support networks. Cedar Breaks had been transformed from a town haunted by fear to one motivated by empathy and action. One of the most significant challenges was reintegrating into normal social life. Friends who had once laughed with Nicole now approached cautiously, unsure of how much she had changed. She struggled to navigate familiar places without anxiety or fear. Simple interactions, a greeting at the grocery store, a conversation in the park after felt overwhelming. Marcus reminded her, "You survived 10 years in isolation. You can handle this too, one step at a time." During the early months, Nicole began documenting her experiences. At first, it was just short notes and sketches. Later, she expanded into full journals, detailing her feelings, memories, and the moments of resilience that had kept her alive. Writing became therapeutic, a way to process trauma and regain a sense of agency. Her writing also served as an inspiration to other survivors and families searching for missing loved ones. Hammond remained a constant figure throughout the recovery. He visited frequently, sometimes to discuss the ongoing legal case against Frank, and other times simply to check Nicole's well-being. His presence was professional yet compassionate, a steady reminder that justice had been served and that she was not too alone. Legal proceedings were complex and lengthy. Frank's trial drew attention from across the state, but precisions ensured Nicole was shielded from unnecessary media exposure. Prosecutors presented detailed evidence of Frank's obsession, the meticulous planning, and the psychological harm inflicted on Nicole. Expert witnesses testified on trauma, the long-term effects of isolation, and the danger Frank posed. The community watched closely, yielded when the court handed down a life sentence without parole. Justice had been achieved, though the emotional scare remained. As months passed, Nicole began reconnecting with the world in more substantial ways. She enrolled in online courses to refresh her education, started volunteering with organizations helping other survivors, and even began speaking publicly about her experience. Her talks were careful, structured, and empathetic. She focused not only on danger she had faced, but also on the importance of hope, resilience, and community support. The town of Cedar Breaks embraced her as both a survivor and a symbol. Annual events were organized in her honor, emphasizing vigilance, empathy, and community solidarity. Local newspapers ran stories about her return, highlighting not only the tragedy but also the triumph of human spirit and perseverance. Nicole's story became a case study for law enforcement. psychologists, and community leaders on the long-term impact of trauma and the pathways to recovery. Relationship in her life depended and involved. Marcus remained a steadfast presence, supporting her physically and emotionally. Old friendships were rekindled slowly, built on trust and understanding. Nearby once distant became aliens and creating a safe environment for her to thrive. Nicole's story united the town, bridging generational gaps and inspiring collaborative efforts to ensure no other family would endure what she had suffered. In the broader world, her case influenced policy changes and the procedural updates for missing persons investigations. Law enforcement agencies adopted more advanced tracking methods. Collaboration with federal deputies improved, and psychological support for families of missing persons became more standardized. Nicole's experience, though harrowing, catalyzed real-world improvements in public safety and awareness. Nicole's personal milestones were celebrated quietly and meaningfully. The first time she spent a night away from home without anxiety. The first meal shared in a crowded restaurant. The first laugh with friends that felt completely safe. Each was a victory. She learned to embrace moments of joy without guilt, recognizing that surviving did not mean reliving trauma identifiedly. Therapy sessions gradually shifted focus from survival to growth. Nicole explored personal goals, creative endeavors, and future expressions. She developed skills in art, writing, and community leadership. She began mentoring other survivors, helping them navigate the challenging path of reintegration. Her own experiences became tools for empathy and education. The emotional impact on Cedar Breaks remained profound. Families felt renewed hope. Children learned the importance of vigilance and compassion. Local authorities refined response strategies for missing persons. Nicole's journey became woven into the community's identity, a testament to resilience, human connections, and the transformative power of hope. Even Frank's inaccuracies had long-term implications. His trial and imprisonment became part of legal studies, illustrating both the importance of forensic science and the consequence of obsession and psychological manipulation. Mental health professionals use the case to educate on the risks of untreated obsession and the social impact of criminal behavior. Nicole's recovery was not without setbacks. Flashbacks and anxiety attacks sometimes returned unexpectedly, triggered by news reports, loud noises, or unfamiliar environments. But with ongoing therapy, supportive relationships, and gradual exposure, she learned to navigate this challenge. Each setback became an opportunity to strengthen resilience and refine coping mechanism. Community engagement became a central theme in her life. Nicole spearheaded initiatives to improve safety education, volunteer programs, and support networks. She collaborated with local law enforcement, sharing insights on behavior patterns, risk awareness, and psychological indicators that could prevent future disappearances. Marcus and Nicole worked together to create a safe, nurturing environment at home. Gardens, pets, and shared routines helped instill a sense of normalcy. Even mundane tasks, cooking, cleaning, shopping, became meaningful acts of reclaiming life. Their bond founded not only on love but on shared resilience and the understanding of human fragility and strength. Hammond continued to monitor the case, ensuring that Nicole's reintegration remained safe. He also began training other detectives, sharing lessons learned from the decade-long investigation. The case of Nicole Powell became a benchmark, demonstrating the importance of patience, thoroughness, and empathy in law enforcement. Years later, Nicole began publishing her story in a series of books, focusing on her survival, psychological recovery, and the lessons learned about resilience. The books were widely reviewed, praised for their clarity, empathy, and accessibility. Readers found inspiration in her journey, applying her lessons to personal challenges and community advocacy. Cedar breaks evolved alongside Nico's recovery. Public spaces were improved for safety. Local schools included programs on missing persons awareness, and community centers offered psychological supports for trauma survivors. Nichols' business influences and advocacy transformed the town into model of resilience and protective engagement. Nichols' journey, though marked by trauma, ultimately became a story of empowerment. She learned to navigate the world with awareness, compassion, and courage. She found joy, meaning, and purpose in activities that connected her to the world and to others. Each day was a choice, a reformation of life, and the human capacity to endure and flourish. The case of Frank the Carpenter and Nicole Powell concluded legally, but its lesson continued to resonate. Families learned to trust in persistence and advocacy. Law enforcement refined their approaches to missing persons. Communities realized the importance of empathy, vigilance, and support networks. Nicole's story became a guiding light, demonstrating that even the darkest circumstances could lead to renewal, healing, and hope. Through it all, Nicole and Marcus thrived. They embraced normalcy, found joy in simple pleasures, and contributed meaningfully to other community. They became symbols of resilience, hope, and the transformative power of survival. Cedar Breaks, once haunted by uncertainty and fear, became a town defined by strength, compassion, and unity. Years later, when Nicole reflected on the journey, she understood that survival was not only about enduring hardship, but also about reclaiming life, fostering connection, and inspiring others. The path had been long, fraught with challenge, but it had led to growth, meaning, and profound sense of purpose. She knew the journey was ongoing, but she faced that future with courage, gratitude, and hope. Detective Hammond, looking back on the decade-long investigation, recognized that the case had tested every skill, patience, and instinct, but it had also reaffirmed the importance of persistence, empathy, and humanity in the pursuit of justice. The resolution of Nicole's Power's story was more than a legal victory. It was a testament to the power of resilience, community, and unwavering dedication. And so, Cedar Breaks settled into a new chapter, carrying with it the legacy of hope and renewal. Nicole Powell, once lost to the world, became a living symbol that even the darkest times, light could be found, nurtured, and shared. The town had been changed forever, but through healing, connection, and courage, it had found a strength that would endure for generations to come. Years had passed since Nicole Powell's returned to Cedar Breaks, and the town had changed in ways no one could have imagined. The fear that once hovered over the streets had been replaced with vigilance, community support, and a sense of unity that strengthened with each passing day. The story of her survival became more than a headline. It became a living lesson on hope, courage, and resilience. Nicole had grown into a symbol of perseverance. Her daily routine was filled with purpose and intention. Morning began with quiet reflection, a cup of tea on the porch, watching the sun rise over the small town. These simple moments reminded her that life, though fragile, was beautiful and worth cherishing. Marcus joined her, often shared silence, appreciating the calm after years of chores. Their home had transformed into warm sanctuary. Gardens bloomed with flowers and vegetables, filling the air with fragrance and color. Birds nested in the trees, their songs marking in the rhythm of a peaceful life. Nicole had taken to painting, using art as a way to express emotions she could not always put into words. Each canvas told a story, not only of trauma, but of resilience, hope, and a slowly rebuilding sense of itself. The community respect for Nicole's never won. Schools invited her to speak about safety, empathy, and courage, though she always approached such engagement cautiously. Children listened with wide eyes as she explained with the importance of trusting adults, noticing when something felt wrong, and having the courage to ask for help. Her words were simple but powerful, delivered in a tone that was approachable and full of warmth. Nicole's writing had grown into a significant project. She published books detailing her experiences, focusing on survival, psychological recovery, and rebuilding life. Readers from across the country found inspiration in her story, using her insight to face their own challenges. She often said that writing had become both a shield and a bridge, a way to protect herself from her own memories while connecting with others who needed guidance and hope. Marcus remained by her side, not only as a partner but as a source of quiet strength. Together, they navigated the complexities of life after trauma. While Nicole faced occasional anxiety or flashbacks, Marcus provided patient support, grounding her in reality and reminding her of her achievements. Their bond, forged through trust and shared experiences, grew stronger each year. Cedar Break continued to evolve. Nicole's advocacy had inspired town officials to create new safety programs and community support networks. Local law enforcement improved coordination with state and federal agencies to prevent cases similar to hers. Nearby Hood Watch programs flourished and mental health resources became more accessible. The town had turned past tragedy into a blueprint for prevention, education, and resilience. Nicole also mentored other survivors. She established small support groups where people could share experiences without fear of judgment. She encouraged open conversation about trauma, mental health, and recovery. Her empathy combined with lived experience made her guidance uniquely believable. Many attendees described her as a beacon of hope, a person who had been through the darkest experiences but had found light and purpose. Over time, Nicole and Marcus began to explore life beyond Cedar Breaks. They traveled to nearby cities and natural parks, each trip carefully planned to ensure comfort and safety. Nature became a source of healing, and the quiet rhythms of rivers, forests, and mountains reminded Nicole of freedom, growth, and the best possibilities of life. Family relationship also deepened. Nicole reconnected with distant relatives, sharing stories of her journey and embracing the chance to rebuild family ties. While some connections had been lost forever, others were reunited, strengthened by the understanding that life was precious and fragile. Holiday gatherings became moments of graduate, laughter, and shared reflection. The legacy of Frank's crime remained a reminder of the danger she had survived, but the Nicole chose not to dwell on anger or bitterness. She acknowledged the past as part of her story but refused to let it define her entirely. In therapy, she learned the importance of acceptance, not forgetting but finding peace with the life she had reclaimed. Her public talks evolved over time. Nicole focused on broadcast, broader lessons, resilience, community engagement, and the importance of mental health care. She emphasized that every survivor's journey was unique and that sports patience and understanding could make a profound difference. Her ability to communicate complex emotional experience in small, accessible language made her talks deeply impactful. Cedar Breaks honored Nicole in various ways. A small park was dedicated in her name, featuring sculptures, benches, and a memorial garden. The park became a space for reflection, community gatherings, and educational programs. Visitors often left notes of encouragement or shared stories of personal growth inspired by Nicole's journey. Nicole also dedicated time to research and education. She partnered with psychologists, sociologists, and law enforcement professionals to study trauma recovery and community resilience. Her insights helped shape policies, improve safety protocols, and educate communities nationwide. She became recognized as a thought leader in trauma recovery and survivor advocacy. Despite the public attention, Nicole chased private moments. She, Marcus, often spent evening reading, cooking, or talking quiet. Walks in nature, music, laughter, and shared experiences become anchors, reinforcing the sense of life reclaimed and the stability they had built together. Personal milestones continued to mark her recovery. The first night out without fear, the first public speech, the first laugh without tension, the first slow walk through the dawn. All were celebrated quietly but meaningfully. Nicole learned to recognize these achievements as symbols of progress, understanding that healing was ongoing and incremental. Friends from her past gradually returned, drawn by the change they saw in her and the life she had rebuilt. All teachers, neighbors, and classmates offered support and friendship, bridging the gap between her past and present. Nicole welcomed these connections carefully, mindful of her own boundaries and needs. Community initiatives expanded beyond safety and mental health. Cedar Breaks developed art programs, youth mentorship projects, and volunteers opportunities inspired by Nicole's advocacy. Her story encouraged collaboration, empathy, and action. The town became a model for combining personal resilience with collective responsibility, showing how communities could transform tragedy into strength. Legal and law enforcement communities continued to reference her case. Frank's imprisonment remained a cautionary tale in criminal psychology, law enforcement training, and victim advocacy. Nicole's involvement in workshops and seminars provided first-hand insight, enriching professional understanding of trauma, recovery, and prevention. In her personal reflections, Nicole recognized that survival was not merely about endurance, but about transformation. She had faced unimaginable challenge, yet emerged with a renewed sense of purpose. She learned to embrace joy, nurture relationships, and contribute meaningfully to the world. Each day became a conscious choice to live fully, with gratitude, courage, and empathy. Marcus and Nicole began planning long-term projects together. They envisioned creating a foundation for survivors, funding educational programs, psychological support, and public awareness campaigns. Their goal was to ensure that no one facing trauma would feel entirely alone. Through this work, their partnership evolved into a shared mission, blending personal healing with social impact. Community celebrations reflected this goal. Cedar Breaks hosted annual Hope Days, combining educational programs, artistic displays, and public talks. Nicole's story was central, but she events highlighted collective resilience, community strength, and the power of empathy. These gatherings became a tradition, reinforcing bonds among residents and inspiring neighboring towns to adopt similar programs. Nicole's artistic pursuits flourished alongside her advocacy. Her paintings, often depicting light breaking through darkness, were displayed in local galleries and community centers. Each piece carried emotion, resilience, and hope, allowing viewers to connect with her journey on a personal level. Art became both expression and healing, a bridge between personal experience and public inspiration. Family bonds strengthened as well. Marcus and Nicole nurtured friendships, embraced relatives, and connected with neighbors of meaningful ways. Together, they cultivated an environment of trust, safety, and mutual support. Life, uncertain and perilous, had transformed into a tapestry of shared experiences, joy, and growth. Over time, Nicole became a mentor to young people in Cedar Breaks. She guided teenagers, especially those facing adversity, teaching resilience, empathy, and practical strategies for coping with challenge. Her own journey became a living lesson, demonstrating that courage and persistence could lead to meaningful transformation. As the year passed, Cedar Breaks evolved into a model community, policies, education programs, and social initiatives inspired by Nicole's experience. Spread beyond the town, news outlets highlighted the transformation, emphasizing how a single survivor's story could reshape an entire community. The town's reputation shifted from tragedy to resilience, a beacon for others seeking hope and guidance. Nicole and Marcus occasionally reflected on the decade that had changed their lives forever. They acknowledged the pain, loss, and challenge, but also celebrated the growth, connection, and impact they had achieved. The scare remained, but they were now markers or staying, proof their survival could lead to purpose and fulfillment. Nicole's legacy extended into every aspect of Cedar Breaks. Children learned empathy and courage. Families embraced support networks. Law enforcement refined methods for safety, and community programs flourished. Her influence became imminent in the town's identity, ensuring that her journey would inspire generations to come. In private moments, Nicole often sat quietly, appreciating the simple beauty of life. She watched sunset, listened to bird songs, and felt the winds on her face. Each sensation a reminder of freedom resigned. She chased laughter, small joys, and the presence of loved ones. These moments, though ordinary, create extraordinary significance. Marcus and Nicole also embraced future plans they envisioned expanding their foundation, traveling to share experience and continuing personal growth. Their vision included fostering community resilience, supporting survivors nationwide, creating educational programs emphasizing empathy, vigilance, and hope. Ultimately, Nicole's journey exemplified the power of human resilience. She transformed trauma into purpose, fear into courage, and isolation into connection. Cedar Breaks on shaded by tragedy became a town defined by compassion, strength, and proactive engagement. Nicole and Marcus embodied the potential for recovery, proving that even the darkest chapters could lead to light, meaning, and legacy of hope. The story of Nicole Powell, from capability to healing and empowerment, remained a testament of the enduring spirit of humanity. Through her survival, advocacy, and creativity, she left a lasting mark not only on Cedar Breaks but on the wider world. Her journey illustrated that life, no matter how challenged, could be reclaimed, nurtured, and celebrated. As the sun set over Cedar Breaks, Nichols and Marcus sat together on their porch, holding hands and watching the horizon. The past remained a part of them, but the future was there to shape. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the life they had rebuilt and the community they had helped transform, they understood the profound truth. Survival was only the beginning, and the journey of healing, growth, and purpose was a lifelong adventure filled with hope, connection, and endless possibility.